It is Stu in for Glenn on the Glenn Beck program, and we've been talking about this bizarre. I don't want to call it an interview because it wasn't. It was I don't know an extended verbal assault of Donald Trump at the National Association of Black Journalists gathering on Wednesday, and there was a bunch of stuff that came out of this. Honestly. There were several clips that the media is excited about. And I guess you can, I think, pretty fairly question why Donald Trump bothered to go to this gathering in the first place. I don't know what the other outcome was. We obviously knew what was going on here. These are not, there's not a lot of conservative black journalists involved in the National Association of Black Journalists. This is a left-wing, mainstream media / left-wing organization. I don't know if there's any separation between those two groups anymore, but maybe at one point there was a little bit. Now it seems like they're just kind of moving in unison. And this group brought in Trump. Now Trump, we played the clip earlier when he answered the very first question, which was just straight out like, here's all the racist things you say. Why are you so racist? Was essentially every single question some version of that. And look, if I'm a campaign advisor to Donald Trump, I ask, why bother? Like, what's the upside here? You know what's going to happen. They're going to come in here and yell at you for an hour. And he was told, apparently, that Kamala Harris was also going to be there. So I don't know, seemingly that they either misled him in some way or she dropped out last second. It's hard to know exactly what the true background is. But the main clip that came out of this was Donald Trump's answer on a question by an ABC reporter about Kamala Harris's racial identity. Now, look, we're just talking about this, 15 minutes ago. There, honestly, to me, could be nothing less important. I don't care about her racial identity. I don't care about anybody's racial identity. It's a stupid thing to be talking about. But the media is constantly talking about it. And certainly when you go to an organization that has segregated itself by race, the National Association of Black Journalists, you're going to get a focus on race. That is what's going to happen in a situation like that. And so this is one of the many racially focused questions Trump was asked in an aggressive manner during this interview. And here's how it went.
Do you believe that Vice President Kamala Harris is only on the ticket because she is a black woman?
Well, I can say no. I think it's maybe a little bit different. So I've known her a long time indirectly, not directly very much. And she was always of Indian heritage, and she was only promoting Indian heritage. I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. So I don't know, is she Indian or is she black?
She has always identified as a black woman. She went to a historically black college.
I respect either one, but she obviously doesn't, because she was Indian all the way, and then all of a sudden she made a turn and she became a black person.
Just to be clear, sir, do you believe that
I think somebody should look into that too.
Trump obviously loves this stuff. He loves going into these situations. He loves fighting with reporters. He loves taking them down these roads. This is something that Donald Trump likes to do. I think he enjoys doing it. And we should get into his actual answer here in a second. But first of all, the reporter herself, she's from ABC News, and she's in the middle of this, almost like this Twitter conversation with Donald Trump. She's trying to answer all of his claims when he says he was the best president since Abraham Lincoln. She's like, well, what about Lyndon Baines Johnson? That's not journalism. That's just an argument some Democrat would make. Just outwardly saying the things that some left-winger on Twitter would say, that might be an appropriate thing for a back and forth. Like you want to go into some version of Crossfire or, some panel show where there's a bunch of panelists just arguing with each other. Like, you can absolutely get that as an argument. You want to make that argument that the guy who said the N-word constantly is really the best friend of the black population with Lyndon Baines Johnson. You can do that if you want, but it's not journalism. That's just somebody making a left-wing point. That's essentially what you'd think someone like Kamala Harris would say if she were on stage. And of course, that is basically what you have here. You have a left-wing person posing as a journalist, saying left-wing things. But fundamentally here, the answer to this question, what did Kamala Harris become vice president only because she was black? It's an interesting question. Obviously, it's asked with a specific tone in mind here. The accusation is if you believe that she only got this job because she was black, you're a racist. That's the implication of the question. And I think we can all pretty honestly say we don't know everything that went into the decision-making process of Joe Biden picking Kamala Harris. To me, it seems like a bit of insanity. Maybe dementia had kicked in because it's a terrible choice and she's been a terrible vice president. And if she is elected president, she will be a terrible president. But we don't know everything that went into that decision. We may never know everything that went into that decision. I can't imagine Joe Biden remembers exactly how he made that decision. He can't remember what he had for lunch last Tuesday. But there are a couple things we do know about that decision-making process. There are a couple of standards that were put out there publicly by Joe Biden that he seemingly stuck to very, very closely. One aspect of this decision-making process was that the skin color had to be appropriate. There had to be a person of color who was chosen to be this vice president. We know that because he said it in advance. We also know that a particular set of genitals and reproductive organs were a requirement of getting this job. We know he was going to put a woman of color into this job. He successfully eliminated approximately 98% of the population before he made the decision. We know that because he said it over and over again. We know exactly how this occurred. We can all theorize that there were additional requirements and additional reasons Kamala Harris was picked as vice president. We can all make these arguments up in our minds. We can all formulate how we would have done it. We can all think about how Biden may have done it. We can think about he may have had a bingo set out and he may have picked bingo balls to see randomly which president was going to be picked or which vice presidential candidate was going to be picked. We have no idea how he made that decision outside of the fact that he picked because of gender and race. That's what we know. That's the only thing we know. You can make up a decision-making process in your mind that you think he went through, but the one we know he went through was eliminating every white person, every Asian person, and I say Asian because I don't understand these groups. Kamala's apparently also the first Asian VP. So apparently he didn't eliminate Asian people, but he did eliminate every other race and every other gender, every one of the 96 genders except woman that apparently they've learned how to define. We know that because he said it. So when you ask, was Kamala Harris only the VP pick because of the color of her skin? We can't guarantee it was only the reason. We just know it had to be part of it. We can't say that it was the only reason she was selected as vice president. We just know it was a qualification for being considered. To me, that's a terrible decision. To me, that is a horrible way to go through a process. About 12% of the population is black. So 88% of the population is immediately disqualified. About half of the black population is male. So 6% more were immediately qualified, which leaves you only with 6% of the population. About a third of those are too old. About a third of those are too young, we can assume. Which leaves you with about 2% of the population. Now, is Kamala Harris the most qualified black woman to become vice president? I can guarantee you the answer to that is no. However, that's what Joe Biden apparently selected. But at no point did he try to make you believe she was the most qualified person, because he eliminated 98% of the population before considering anyone. If you don't believe me, read the reporting from CNN at the time when he was down to the last 4 people for the role. All of them were black women. All of them. He couldn't find anyone in any racial group. Why? He didn't look. He didn't look at Hispanic candidates. He didn't look at Native American candidates. He didn't look at anyone other than black women. Why? Quite clearly, because he was pandering to an audience, and because identity politics and racial makeup and gender is more important than merit. Was Kamala Harris the most qualified person? I can guarantee you the answer to that is no. But I don't think Joe Biden can, because he didn't even look at these other groups. How do we know that a more qualified black man was not available? Joe Biden doesn't know. You might know. Joe Biden doesn't know because he never looked. The question is whether that is the appropriate decision-making process. And when you're asked the question, like, is she the only the VP because she's black? Well, I don't know. Representative of the National Association of Black Journalists. I don't make decisions based on race. Do you? Seems like it. When I look at the title of your organization, it sure seems like it. Axios posted a fact check, a reality check. A reality check of Donald Trump. And they say Trump says immigrants are taking black jobs. Reality check. There are no black jobs because there is not any kind of racial requirement for employment, where there is when you want to be the vice president of the United States. We know that because Biden told us. And I don't know, maybe there aren't black jobs. Are there black journalists? Is there a national association of those black journalists? Do they exist? This is nonsense. And over again, they go down these roads.